Folks, and welcome to a special edition of the Michigan Recruiting Insider as the Wolverines have picked up a massive commitment. One that if you were paying attention to the MichiganInsider.com Friday night on the heels of two commitments you should have seen coming. The commitments of Markell Dabney, which was forecast. The commitment of Malakai, which was forecast. Came on the board late that night and said, hey, fireworks were coming before the 4th of July. Just stay tuned. You know, when we talk about fireworks, you should pay attention. Because when we did that last year, and people tried to say, they don't know what they're talking about. They're gassing you up. They looked real stupid, didn't they? Well, because those fireworks came. They came multiple times. There was like a small fireworks show. And then there was like a huge fireworks show. We said, hey, there going to be some fireworks this year before the 4th of July. Maybe not quite on the scale that we saw last November, but there were going to be some big fireworks before the 4th of July. Well, they just came. Carter Meadows, defensive end, Gonzaga College High, Washington, D.C., the highest rated commit now in the Michigan Wolverines 2026 class is in the fold, committed to the Wolverines over Ohio State. Joining me to break that down, the best crew in the land when it comes to covering the University of Michigan, the crew at the MichiganInsider.com, starting, of course, with Mr. Brice Marich. Brice, how are you?
Solid. It's huge news. A lot to talk about, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Lorenz. Steve, how are you?
Great. Yeah, lots to talk about. I said I think this is their biggest run since the Taco Charlton, Jake Butt, Jordan Lewis weekend back in 2013. I had just started, and I was like, "Is it going to be like this every single summer?" And it hasn't been, but this feels a lot like that run was. So it's been fun to cover, and we've totally been on top of it too. Has been great for our users. So
yeah, Carter. Brice, you remember when Carter and Titan Davis, both now in the fold, they both came by the Michigan Insider studio. And you remember when they walked in, and you're like, man, if these two guys wind up in the class, this is what it's supposed to look like. I mean, you would have two edge guys, two defensive linemen that basically block out the sun. This is what it's supposed to look like. And this is the kind of defensive line class that when you're coming off of this run of defensive line production, I mean, if you're Michigan, you expect to be able to get these kinds of guys, Brice, and here we are.
The picnic for me, like you mentioned, is just the look. Sometimes some guys look like they got it. Some guys look like they don't. But that's not an eyeball test. You look at a guy like Mason Graham, right? He maybe didn't pass the eyeball test, but he passed on the field. And one thing for sure, Carter Meadows, he passed the test for sure. Like 6'6", 230, long, lean. He can add, muscle to that frame. You watch his highlights, he's knifing in the backfield. He holds the edge extremely well. He puts his shoulder down. He's not, he's willing to tackle. He comes up from behind. If it's a screen, he chases down the guy couple, 10 to 15 yards downfield. Like, this is the do-it-all type of player you're looking for. He's a dual sport athlete. He actually got an offer in basketball, right? So he's a quality basketball player. And on top of that, too, mentioning Mason Graham, he plays in the DMV against some premier high schools. So it's not like he's going against scrubs, right? This is a guy that faces top competition. You're watching a couple of highlights right now, and I think this is my favorite one because you watch the offensive tackle just do the, Cobra Kai surrender. Like, oh crap! Like, what do I do against that, coach? Like, there's not much you can do against that. But I mentioned this last podcast. I think Lou Esposito, defensive line coach, has landed arguably all of his top targets. I mean, there's a few probably still left on the board that he probably would like to still land. But you add Carter Meadows, and this is the centerpiece, essentially. Not only the defensive line hole, but the class in general. I mean, there's only maybe one or two guys I would say that could top the Carter Meadows commitment. But this is massive. This is huge. And this is a day one starter, in my opinion. He's got that potential. He's got the athleticism, the size, the speed, the power, everything about him. He's got all the tools in the toolbox. I love the pickup. And again, Sam, you mentioned Michigan wants to win the trenches. This is the type of player that helps you in those big games.
Yeah, Steve, when football coaches dreamed about, hey, man, we need to get some of those basketball guys, some of those tight ends, some of those power forward types to come over to the basketball field, some of those small forward types to come over to the football field. This is why, because that kind of athleticism, you put them at the defensive end spot, they could be game changers. And that's why you see a guy like Carter Meadows, who was a D1 guy, a big time basketball prospect, but 6'6", 215, 220. There are a lot of guys like that on the basketball court, Steve. On the football field, though, you take 6'6", 215, 220, and you put about 30 pounds on that frame and keep that athleticism, and that is truly unique. That is special. That is why the country was salivating over Carter Meadows, and that is why the Michigan Wolverines, they're doing. Lou Esposito is like 315 pounds. I'm sorry, Lou, if I got it wrong, but he's doing a cartwheel right now, Steve Lorenz.
Yeah, so the two things I think about with this one, we've seen Michigan kind of become what you would call like edge U. I think at this point, you think about how many pass rushers are in the league, and outside of maybe like Aiden and Derek Moore, a lot of them have been like 3-star guys that Michigan developed into like star pass rushers, NFL guys. Now these are the kind of guys, like you said, that we've been waiting for Michigan for that to pay off, because this dude has a ceiling that's about limitless at that position, right? I mean, he has everything you could possibly ask for. Definitely some work to do, especially in the weight room. But as far as the athleticism, just the wherewithal on the field, he's definitely worthy of a 5-star ranking, in my opinion. And then the other thing, you talk about Lou Esposito, without mentioning names, Michigan could not have asked for their defensive line coaching situation to have turned out, given how everything played out with their defensive line coaching situation after Mike Elston left. I don't think you could, if you're Michigan, you got to be thrilled that things turned out the way they did. So they're essentially, and we're going to talk about a couple other guys still. I mean, of the guys they've offered, at least for me, especially when I watch, they're basically handpicking the guys that I'm like, this dude's a stud, this dude's a stud, this dude's a stud. I mean, this could end up being on paper their best defensive line class in history. So, yeah, props to Lou Esposito, the rest of the Michigan staff. But, can't say enough about this pickup.
Yeah, man. I said when we were talking about, I can't remember if it was Alistair. I think it was Alistair. Or maybe it was Titan. It was Titan. That's what it was. It was Titan. Because they were recruiting against Alabama. And I said, right now, if you're a defensive lineman and you're comparing Michigan to Alabama, you're saying, I'm choosing, in terms of defensive line development, defensive line resume, right? You're thinking Michigan. The guys that Lou Esposito produced before he got to Michigan. I just highlight the big names. I just highlight, obviously, your Braden Fisk, your the other kid, that the other second round pick who will come to me in a moment.
Jared Verse.
Jared Verse is another one, and there's another one as well, though, that continues to really, I think, sort of meet the as far as the bar for development. guys that were off the radar, no one was really recruiting or knew about as far as prospects are concerned. And you're like, where did they get this dude? And you look at Lou Esposito is finding these guys at Western Michigan and developing them. You put a guy like that can find untapped potential, beating Grand Valley for guys, right? Can Marshawn Nealon is the dude I'm thinking of. Marshawn Nealon is the guy that I'm thinking of. You can find guys like that, turn them into second-round picks. You go to Michigan now, and you put them with a guy like, obviously KG. You put them with a guy like Mason Graham. You put them with a guy like Josiah Stewart. And you amplify those guys. And it's like, sky's the limit. And so these defensive linemen, they start to see that, right? That's why, Nate, he was committed to Auburn, and I think he kind of saw, well, wait a minute. let me change that decision around. That was kind of premature. Let me get back and come back to Michigan. And I think you see, as they've been on this run here in this cycle, all of these defensive linemen, like you said, Steve, kind of handpicking these guys and seeing how they all fit together. I agree with you. On paper, and it's not over. Defensive line recruiting is not over. That's got to be the scary thing for the opposition. That when you look at it, Michigan could be getting more to the fold. And when you're a guy like Carter Meadows, who you also mentioned, there's work to do. He's about 215, 220 pounds right now. He's going to add 30 pounds to his frame. He's still young in his football development, Steve. This was a basketball guy. If you go in our database, what's up, Boop? So you go in our basketball database, he's still in there as a basketball prospect. That's what he was regarded as. And so he goes over to football, and it's like, oh, my God, this dude is a big-time guy because you can't teach 6'6", can bend, can change direction, has speed, and burst. And, oh, my goodness, what can a coach who can develop do with this? You put him with a guy like Lou Esposito, and it's like, oh, man, he is going to turn this dude into an absolute animal. And you got to figure a kid like that had to see that when he's looking at all of these schools, came down to Michigan and Ohio State. And it's like, okay, that's not to say that Ohio State hasn't developed some guys. They had some guys in this last draft. But, man, if you're looking at what just happened with Lou just in this last draft, no offense to Larry Johnson, who's developed his share of guys, give Larry his credit. But, you got that with Lou right here in this last cycle. And then here's the other piece, guys. And Brice, you know this. Huge academic piece. He is an all-around student athlete, and that too came ringing through. So if you add all of those pieces to the fold, the development, the connection with the coaching staff, and then you throw academics on top of it too, that to me, all those ingredients kind of puts it over the top for Michigan.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I want to add to that too, I think Michigan also did a really good job with the family, right? I think Michigan has shown the ability to really resonate with the family. And then you mentioned, Sam, academics is very important, especially in the Carter Meadows household. I think for Michigan, that's an easy sell, right? There's other things you can sell, like the defensive line production, Lou Esposito, Sharon Moore, what they did at the end of the year with that momentum being Ohio State and Alabama. But at the end of the day, he made it very clear when he came in the studio, like, I want to get a degree from a prestigious institution. And he looks at Michigan as he basically said, it's the best of both worlds. He's going to get the great academics. He's going to get the great football. And at that moment, I looked at you, you looked at me, and I was kind of like, okay. And we say this on the podcast all the time. This is a Michigan type of kid. And you could see it through and through. And this is just one of those guys that's going to be perfect for the program.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, you hear us talk about him. I think it's good to kind of hear it in his own words. A couple of clips from the highest rated prospect in the class now. The class is not over. There are other big time fish out there still. They're still recruiting. Calvin Russell, very much in that mix, still recruiting. Savion Hyder, very much in that mix. But right now, the guy setting the bar in Michigan's class is one Mr. Carter Meadows, Gonzaga College High School. And he talked about it when he came in studio a few months back early in the spring, that, hey, Lou Esposito and the connection that he is forging with him here, even in recruiting, even before he gets on campus, that connection is what really was resonating with him. So this was the part where he was kind of talking about, hey, Coach Espo, that's what really, as he knew about Michigan, but he didn't know about Coach Espo until he really started to get into his Michigan recruitment. So here's that part where he's talking about that with Coach Espo.
Right. I did not know much about Coach Espo before, but I obviously, Michigan is a big time program, and they have a reputation, like you said, for developing people. And bringing in Coach Espo was definitely just a move to, help the players to the best of their ability.
So what's the vibe like with him so far? Like kind of the personal connection between you and him, just recruiter and recruit?
For sure. I really like him. Yeah, he's a very honest dude. He's always asking me about, he's not always talking about football. He's talking about life outside of football, trying to get to know me on a personal level, and I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now that you've been here, I know you came up for a game, but now that you were able to sort of be here, be face-to-face games, there's the game, there's, being with the team and the players. You get a chance to be with him face-to-face, talking to him in meetings, watch him coach guys,
Right.
the guys in practice. What have you gleaned from that experience, being up close and personal with him?
Yeah, I say definitely from practice, going to the Indies and even in the team, I can tell he's passionate about his guys and he holds them to a standard. And that's everything I'm looking for in a coach. He's not going to let them not give their best every play, not be their best every play. He's going to get the best out of them every time. And that's something I like to see.
All of us back. One of the deals there that really stuck out to me was when he was talking about the connection. Lou really seems to build that personal. All the guys keep talking about how he has really connected with them on a personal level. That is a recurring theme with every single guy that we talk to along the defensive line. Development and the personal relationships. I know that's a part of recruiting, but it doesn't seem to ring quite as often in a lot of other recruitments, guys, that when we talk to guys as often as frequently as it does seem to with Lou. I don't know if you guys have gotten that.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think the other thing too, everyone's so focused on NIL, and that's understandable. It's obviously a factor when you're recruiting big time kids at this point, but that stuff that we've always talked about as far as recruiting, that stuff still matters. These top kids are going to find an NIL deal no matter where they commit. So you're still trying to find those other things. Like you talk about the education stuff. I think some people act like the education factor is like non-existent anymore. But I think any kid in any camp who has any like foresight at all has to understand that the NIL stuff is a short-term situation at the end of the day, right? I mean, you don't know if you're going to get to the pros or not. You don't know when you get to the pros, if you're going to play for 10 years, 5 years, 2 years, so getting it, like talking about getting a prestigious degree, that stuff still matters, I think, to a lot of prospects. And especially, again, we know this, Michigan tries to target those types of kids too, though. They've always tried to target the kids that want the all-around college experience. So, yeah, Meadows obviously reminiscent of a lot of guys that Michigan signed over the years. You can just tell by the way he carries himself in a studio interview like that, Sam. I mean, it's pretty obvious he's wise beyond his years. And, again, a kid looking for the entire package, not just, necessarily the biggest NIL deal. So.
Yep. And so then he went from that to talking about another thing. You watch these guys be coached by a former NFL coach on defense and Wink Martindale. That was another piece that really rang true. And a kid that grew up in the DMV or is growing up in the DMV, got to be familiar with him being formerly with the Baltimore Ravens. So that too resonated, Coach Wink. So here he is talking about Wink Martindale. One, Mr. Wink Martindale.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know, he's done a lot at a higher level now. Came to Michigan and is doing the same thing. What have your impressions been of Coach
I mean,
Wink?
obviously everybody knows who Coach Wink is and everything that he's done, and it's just kind of amazing that he's taken that his NFL experience and come to the college level and given Michigan, you know, a great defense each year he's coached, and I think that's great. It's great to be a part of that.
So, fellas, that was the moment where he was like, it was great to be a part of that. And so then went from that to asking him about, I don't know if you remember the moment when I asked him about the OSU game, Brice. You know, if he remembers watching or if he remembers his thought on Michigan at the time. You know, they had some ebbs and flows on the season, and a lot of guys were sitting out that game. Michigan's a 4-touchdown underdog in the contest, right? And they went out and they punk Ohio State up and down the field, and it's led by the defensive line. They hammered Ohio State up and down the field. They dropped the hammer on them. Dropped the hammer on Ohio State, left and right, to and fro, however they wanted it, they got it. And he said it did. It stuck with him. You got to wonder if when it's down to Michigan and Ohio State, and Ohio State has a lot to offer on the football field, make no mistake. But when you're comparing apples to apples, it's really the same. Even if academics puts it over the top, right? And you say, you know, you compare the two, and you probably say it was academics that puts it over the top. But even if you settle to just football, and you're a defensive lineman, and you look at the two, and you say, man, you look at how Michigan just punked them, just curb stomped, made them quit on their own field, had them crying to their coaches on their own field. Which one would you want to be a part of? And so here is Carter Meadows recalling how that impacted him, seeing that. Now it obviously didn't touch him quite like it, with the spirit that I'm sharing with you right now, but it did impact him. And here is what he had to say about that moment, watching Michigan beat Ohio State and then Alabama at the end of the season, shorthanded at the time. Watched them last year. It was a season of ebbs and flows, right?
Right.
He started out on a bit of a high note with some of the early success, and then there was a dip.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously they finished really strong despite having a lot of guys out, with the win over Ohio State, with the win over Alabama. Were you watching? I know you got to focus on your own season, but did you take notice of the ebb and flow of the season?
For sure. And I think I did take notice, and I think it signifies like who they are as a program and what they represent. You know, it's not, you're going to face adversity as a team, but the fact that they could push through that and end off the season on a high note is something special.
Fellas, I don't think that was nothing. I mean, you could tell from the look on his face, he was like, yeah, that was a thing. He definitely took note of it, that to be able to go in their house and beat them, Steve, that was, his word was, that was special. That doesn't leave you.
I mean, I got to think two of the most, outside of the actual on the field with Michigan basically winning without two All-Americans, one on each side of the ball, and Michigan winning the line of scrimmage. I mean, again, if you're watching the game or you're watching the aftermath, I mean, the two most memorable moments are Jack Sawyer crying and Kalel Mullings in his interview saying, like, you need to learn how to lose. You know, like, you need, so you know what I mean? Like, and I do wonder, like, you're a kid considering both of those programs, just such a difference in, I guess what you would call like culture, I guess, that you're seeing it on your TV, right? So, I'm not surprised if you're a kid comparing both of those two schools, it's gotta, make a difference. I mean, they're still putting guys in the pros. Obviously, the Lions just drafted Tyleik Williams up front in the middle, but I mean, Tuliamalu was the number one player in the country. I mean, he fell to the second round. I mean, Michigan had three edge players drafted or three defensive linemen drafted before him. Jack Sawyer fell to the fourth or fifth round, and he was the number 2 or 3 player in that class. And Michigan, like I said, Michigan's track record in developing guys who weren't as highly touted is a lot longer than Ohio State's at this point, as far as especially on the defensive side of the ball. So, again, you're a kid like in his position saying, okay, I can go anywhere I want. They've already done this with, again, even a Josiah Stewart, Kwity Paye, Chase Winovich, all these guys got drafted. I think I have more talent than that. What can they do with a guy like me? Our guys compared him to Brian Burns out of Florida State, who I believe was a top 15 or 20 draft pick in the NFL and also did make an impact his freshman year at Florida State. So, the kid's got all the tools, and yeah, he definitely gives off the vibe that he approaches recruitment in the right way.
Yeah, Brice, it was it couldn't have been drawn up any better for Lou Esposito. And here's the thing: so an epic, if he were done right now, it's an epic haul. But the thing is, it may not be done because there are other big fish, a couple other big fish out there that he has Michigan still very much in the running for. And it makes sense for Michigan to still take, considering how much they play. I mean, you could take 6 defensive linemen in the class, considering how much they rotate guys. They play, 4 play at one time, and they rotate them. So taking 6 isn't outlandish, Brice.
No, and they still got, some big targets on the board. And I'm going to start off with first Deuce Geralds, a guy that stopped by the studio, Sam, 6'2", 6'3", I want to say it's 275, 280. He's going to be an interior type of prospect. 55 offers. You talk about a kid that can literally pick anywhere he wants. He could pick anywhere he wants. The consensus, though, was he was kind of probably going to stay south. His dad had played, I think it was at Ole Miss. I think he's had ties to LSU. So he's been on those schools several times. But Michigan had done a really good job, especially Lou Esposito, building that foundation. And then that first visit when he came up for the spring, he admitted to us, he was like, I'm a little surprised. Like, this was not what I was expecting. I wasn't sure what to expect. And he said they're a business approach and their upfront style, just how they handle everything with inside the program, really resonated, really stood out with him, his family. He decided to make a midweek official visit, which is unique because a lot of these guys, they take their officials over the weekend, they're done. So that kind of, speaks volumes to me, because that says he really likes Michigan, right? You're not going to take a middle of the week OV. You just don't see that very often. And for him to do that, that's a little telling. And I think Michigan has a lot better shot in that race than even I anticipated going into it. And then the other guy, and a name that I'll be honest, I wrote off personally, Julian Walker, right? 6'6", 255 from the state of South Carolina. He's got a very strong relation. He's got a very strong connection to the Gamecocks program. His dad, he's a strength and conditioning. He works in the strength and conditioning program. He's one of the guys there. So I think a lot of schools penciled him as basically a Gamecock, because if you compare to Deuce's offer list to then Julian's offer list, it's a 180. Julian's only, I think he's got less than 20 offers, which is surprising because he's a top, 247 prospect. He's got the length, he's got the size, he's got the athleticism, he's got everything you're looking for. But I think a lot of schools said, we're not going to put our resources recruiting a kid that's just going to be going to South Carolina, right? He's in their own backyard. His dad works for the program. What's the point, right? But Michigan decided to offer in February. Lou Esposito said, let's get him up to campus. He was blown away. And then he decides to return for that this was his last official visit to Michigan for Victor's Weekend. And it's funny because he was in a photo. There's 4 of them. It was Tariq Boney, committed. Ty Davis, committed. Carter Meadows, just committed. Now Julian Walker, uncommitted. And all 4 of those guys were standing in the photo posing together. And that's something when I talked to Julian after his visit, said, yeah, I thought about it, right? Like seeing all these guys potentially teaming up and what we could do on the same defensive line front, that's scary to think about. So if Lou Esposito can land one of those guys, and it's not even out of the realm of possibility he can land both, I think easily this is the best defensive line class I've ever seen compiled at Michigan. And that's just something that I would be blown away. But yeah, Michigan is still very much in it for both those guys for sure.
I love this dude. Big physical speed to power is there now. He's not a finished product by any means, but he is more physically ready than say a Carter Meadows. Like, I think the twitch, you like the twitch with Carter, and the when you talk about Carter's change of direction and that basketball athleticism that is going to translate. But when you watch Julian Walker and how physically violent he is and his ability to throw guys and redirect and get to the quarterback, his first step quickness at that size as well. And then his ability to throw guys, to get off of blocks, to play through contact. Man, you can't teach it. And I think what you said, Brice, is absolutely spot on. When you look at the depression of his recruitment, it is absolutely, in my opinion, related to the fact that teams are like, hey, it's not even worth it to recruit him, Steve, even more so than Zion Robinson. At least with Zion Robinson, you can say his dad is the track coach. It's not like he's in the football building. He's a couple buildings over. I could see his son going to another school because he's a whole different program. But Julian Walker's son, I mean, his dad is in the football building. He's a strength. Like, come on, man. He's going to South Carolina. I'm sure that's what a lot of coaches are saying. It makes no sense to even recruit this dude. But Michigan running that race, running it very well. And that second visit, the official visit, was, I think, it was pivotal. It was crucial for both sides. I think Michigan, from the standpoint, they got him back up. I think they thought they had a shot. But I think their ability not only to get back around him, but to get him around the other guys. I think it was that moment that for all parties involved, I think that's when it really started to resonate that, man, this could really be a thing. You're going to have a lot of people that are telling you, just like they did last year when we were talking about Brice. They're like, no. Listen to us. Listen to us in this moment when we tell you it's real. That Michigan has a real shot. Now, it might take some time to develop. Obviously, South Carolina, I understand why they're the leader. I understand why folks have them on top. I'm just saying this is more than a passing notion. I'm saying that picture, that my gut tells me that picture has meaning. I'll just say that. That picture has meaning, Steve. That he wasn't just in that picture just to pose. I think he was really, really connecting with those guys on the visit.
Yeah, I do. I look at that picture and think that, holy crap, this dude is a hoss. Like, he's bigger than Titan Davis is. Like, you stand them next to you on the hoof. He's one of the most physically impressive prospects that Michigan's recruited on the defensive line in some time. I mean, he already looks like a kid that can play at the college level from a physical standpoint. And he's got that, I don't know, you call it like that. I call it like that, just that classic NFL defensive end body, right? Right now we're obsessed with edge. These, like you said, Sam, like those small forward, like wing type bodies. And then even with Michigan taking a Tariq Boney, who's been the type of kid that Michigan's turned into just a monster on like third down passing situations, a guy who uses speed and quickness. Julian Walker looks like what you imagine when you think of like a late 90s, early 2000s NFL defensive end. I mean, he just looks the part. So I think one thing too is, yes, his recruiting profile would be totally different if a lot of schools didn't just already kind of just figure, why even waste our time here? I got to think the fact that Michigan has continued to push as hard as they have has made a difference, thinking, hey, these guys actually believe in me and my ability. They're not just writing me off to go to a certain school. Like, they really want me to be a part of their program. One of those things where it's like, it's impressive in its own way. So, yeah, I mean, talk about a potentially huge addition. He looks amazing. Like I said, one of my favorite players that they're recruiting up front. And then, I mean, Deuce Geralds just reminds me of like a Mo Hurst almost. I mean, you watch his film, he's taking Wildcat snaps at quarterback at what, 265. He's, that's what we always talk about with the famous Mo Hurst film, was that he was at running back a lot in his film. That was what made his athleticism stand out. And that's what Deuce Geralds kind of looks like to me. So yes, if you're Michigan, I think you absolutely have to find room to take both of these guys. And two, I think the other thing, I don't think it's as big a deal, not just because of the rotation, like you mentioned, Sam, but all six of these guys have different, there aren't any two of them that I think are like the exact same type of player, or guys that are all going to be pigeonholed in the exact same spot. I think there's such a difference in skill sets with the four that they have committed and the two that we know they're still after, that I think Michigan, if you can load up, I mean, we know how important the line of scrimmage is in college football. It's really upside at quarterback. You want to win the line of scrimmage, and these two guys would be huge additions to what they already have.
Yeah, man. That Lou is putting it down in a big way, in a huge way. So defensive line recruiting, huge land with Carter Meadows, but the important note is not over. Defensive line recruiting continues. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention it. I know Brice is going to have to scoot here in a second, but we will continue because the news has not stopped. They picked up Markell Dabney here recently. Markell Dabney, linebacker, Richmond Huguenot. Shout out to my brother-in-law, Marlon Briggs, who's a star at Richmond Huguenot back in the day. And so we know that Dave Terrell, Michigan fans will know Huguenot for that reason. Well, Huguenot back in the spotlight at Michigan because Markell Dabney just committed to Michigan. So I have reason to make it down to Huguenot to watch this young man do his thing. And Brice and Steve, you're talking about a guy who plays receiver on that team, can drop back and play safety for his team. An outstanding athlete, high football IQ guy. He's going to be a guy much like we saw when, way back a couple of years ago when we sent Josh Newkirk down to Valdosta, Georgia. And he was watching a quarterback, a linebacker, a running back, a tight end. What other positions did he play? I think he played but Mike Barrett played everything. Right? He played everything. I don't think he played linebacker, though. And I think, the reason why I mentioned that, though, is he will be playing a different linebacker position here at Michigan. He'll be a stack linebacker. And so I think there will be some coaching and a learning curve for Markel. But once he gets it, I think you could see a Mike Barrett-like impact guy, except more athletic than Mike, because I think he's faster than Mike, which is in a really exciting proposition when you think about it, Markell Dabney being in the fold, Brice, because I know you've talked to him, wanted to get you in on him before you went.
Yeah, common theme again, Virginia. Michigan has done very well in the state of Virginia. This is another guy that Michigan got, and a guy that he mentioned when I went to see him down there, that Shamari Earls was another factor for him. Seeing a guy from his state decide to basically pick up and go to Michigan, that was huge for him. But yeah, 6'1", 205. I talked to his head coach when I was there, and he was like, yeah, I get what Michigan's looking at him for. I promise we're going to play more at linebacker. You will have more linebacker highlights. And it's funny, too, because Markel said, I was like, for you, like, what are you trying to work on? He said, I'm just trying to show my physicality. Because a lot of, like you said, Sam, his highlights are him catching a football or safety, getting an interception, or it's just not linebacker stuff. But he can do it. And Brian John Marie's done a great job evaluating him, cultivating that relationship to the point where as big of a push as SMU really had against him, and they put a lot of eggs in that basket for Markel, his relationship with BJ, Coach BJ, was huge. And the other thing, too, simply, and he told me this, and this was the day prior to him basically committing to SMU, when I asked him, because I was like, is Michigan still kind of in the fold? And he said, here's the deal. If I take that OV to Michigan in June, things are real. And he said at the time, Michigan did finish second, but no offense to SMU, I think the stage of playing in the big house, playing in front of 110,000 people on national TV, that was too big to pass up for him and his family. And I think in the end, that played a bigger factor than some maybe even realize, even other programs as well. So this is a big time land. I think he's got potential to play several spots. Michigan has shown the ability to move guys around. We mentioned like Michael Barrett or Chase Winovich, guys that they've kind of experimented and moved at different positions and it's worked out at. Markell Dabney could be a guy that maybe doesn't work at this position, but he could do this just as well, right? And so I love the pickup. I look at him as a program take, and overall, a great job by Coach, BJ.
Brice, go ahead and scoop, man. I know you got to go. We're going to get in another episode before the 4th because there's so much that's going to be happening. So we'll see you on the next episode, Brice. That's Brice Marich making his way on out. He has some family things to tend to today. Steve, we got to talk about the big fish that the Wolverines were able to get into the fold. One, Mr. Malakai Lee. It shouldn't come as a surprise because Michigan, they were on him feels like the longest and the hardest. The school that he visited the most, surprisingly, coming from Hawaii. But that doesn't mean that it didn't get really, really competitive. Some schools came in hard on Malakai and really pushed Michigan, but Michigan's lead in that recruitment was so big, was so strong that it was ultimately too big and strong for any other team to overcome.
Yeah, and I think that is the overarching theme with this commitment was that, yes, like I think Texas especially late really came in with a big push. He gave glowing reviews on all of his official visits, right? So I think there was at different points, there was trepidation about Alabama, Georgia, USC and BYU were involved earlier in the process, but bowed out a while ago. I think USC has like 13 offensive line commitments or something at this point. So not really a factor, but yeah, Michigan, I mean, he was their number one tackle target. There's just no way around it. We've been reporting that for months and months. I think Grant Newsome was in Hawaii. It was his first stop for the last 3 evaluation periods. The first stop was Honolulu to see Malakai Lee. And for those that think that's some kind of vacation type deal, no. I mean, because you got to be on the road. You got to be somewhere else the next day, and there's nowhere else without flying back over the Pacific, to check on some guys. I mean, I think the one eval period, it was from Honolulu to see Malakai Lee all the way to basically Atlanta to see Bear McWhorter before he committed to Michigan. I mean, it's a hectic process. So, that point being, Michigan really treated him like their number one target throughout. I think Sharon Moore also went out to Hawaii at one point too, and the head coaches were allowed to travel. So Michigan did everything they could to make him feel like a priority. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing was that Michigan, I think, led sizably for quite a long time and just kind of had to hold, some other schools off. But as far as the effort put in, this was, Michigan outworked everybody in this one for sure across the board.
Yeah, this is not I don't want to shortchange any other offensive line recruits. Michigan putting together, I think, some really good, accumulating some really, really good offensive line targets. But if you just look at the highly rated ones, Andrew Babalola from last year, the highest rated recruit along the offensive line in the history of the program. And don't forget, they got Ty Haywood at the end of the cycle, right? So another 5-star, which I still inexplicably just is not a 5-star after he commits to Michigan. Don't get me started on that, right? You talk, don't get me started. You talk to people in the program, and they're like, listen, both these dudes are 5-stars, and they look different. They move different than and that's not no disrespect to any of the guys that are in the program now, but this is a different caliber of athlete that we have brought in here. And you look at the contingent of offensive line coaches that they have at Michigan between Sharon and Grant and Castillo, and that's just, they got a bunch of offensive line coaches in there. And when they start, be like, ooh-wee. And so, I'm talking about these guys, you're talking about Babalola on one side and Haywood on the other side. Well, you get a guy like Malakai, now you can move Haywood inside and have Malakai outside and maybe have a Bear McWhorter inside. You're putting together an offensive line that, even when you look at the lines that won the Joe Moore Award, these lines across the board, at least athletically, I'm just talking about on paper. They'll have to go out and perform, Steve. Just like we're talking about on paper with the defensive line class. We don't know if this defensive line class is going to be better than Mason Graham, KG, and Derek Moore. Right now, the best defensive line class in the history of Michigan football is that one, based on performance. There's no defensive line class better than that one, right? But on paper, what Michigan is putting together right now is the best defensive line class we've ever seen. But what I'm telling you is, on paper, what we're seeing, if they wind up with Andrew Babalola, Ty Haywood, Malakai Lee, Bear McWhorter. Who you want to throw at center? They've had you got a few different candidates that you could throw in there at center, right?
Yep.
Athletically, Steve, they would be better on paper athletically than either of the Joe Moore Award winning lines on paper.
Yeah, so that's been one of the interesting things too when it comes to how many guys were they going to take up front this cycle, who were they going to go after. I really think it's become less and less important. Like, obviously Malakai Lee's a tackle, right? He's a tackle all the way. There are still guys who are tackles, but when you talk about a guy like Haywood, who's just a big athletic body, they're not pigeonholed. Like, for instance, like they're still recruiting John Turntine, the top 100 out of Texas, right? He could easily play tackle at the next level, but he's also a guy that could play on the inside. And I think their biggest focus was let's accumulate as many elite athletic offensive line body types as we possibly can, and then we'll figure out the rest later, right? So, and add on to that, Marky Walbridge, the Massachusetts commitment, right? So we basically it was essentially, I mean, Marky Walbridge was one of the top. I think Michigan had him at the top 2 or 3 tackles in the country based on
no
his
doubt
junior film, right?
Yeah.
So
and so let's spend some time on Marky, because and that is totally rushing through the commit cycle, talking about Malakai. Marky Walbridge had big time offers, and you watch him athletically, and it reminds me of conversations that we had with Mike Sainristel, conversations that we had with Cornelius Johnson, conversations that we had with Zach Zenter. Guys up there in the Northeast, obviously you were just talking about Khalil and his run against Ohio State. They say they think we can't play football up here. So schools don't typically go up there and recruit. But a few of them are starting to. And, those that typically do were back, and those were the schools that were on Marky. But in the end, it came down to Michigan and Boston College, only because, hey, it was one of those things where if he was going to leave, it was like going to be Michigan. Otherwise, he was going to stay home and go to BC.
Yep. And I think we had reported a couple times. I mean, to be fair, Boston College's pitch makes as much sense as any pitch could possibly be. You're home in your backyard. You're going to get a chance to play right away. You're probably not going to play right away at Michigan. They just recruited. They're the ones, Boston College is coming in talking what we just talked about with Ty Haywood, Andrew Babalola, even Andrew Sprague, Blake Frazier.
Yeah.
Going back, these are the kind of guys that you're going to be behind for the next couple of years or so. But Michigan laid out their plan. They stuck to it again. It's not a situation where they're trying to change their pitch in the middle of a recruitment just to try to land a kid. I mean, they've been consistent the whole way through. I think that's one of Grant's biggest assets as a recruiter is just keeping the message consistent, not switching things up just to make it sound better or more appealing, as far as Michigan goes. So, but yeah, another rating I think Michigan would be kind of curious about. I think he's still an 87 or an 88 with us. Same with Bear McWhorter, if we're being honest. I think Michigan had Bear McWhorter as one of the top 3 interior linemen in the cycle. Michigan beat Alabama head-to-head for him, and I think he's ranked past the hundreds as far as interior offensive lineman goes. So make no mistake that Michigan is getting the guys they want up front. Now the question becomes, you have Malakai Lee, you have Marky Walbridge, you have Bear McWhorter. I think they prefer a guy who maybe leans more towards the interior to finish out. I think a lot of, chips start to fall when guys like Lee and Walbridge commit. Now Texas is probably kind of desperate to get a second tackle. Do they up their offer or go stronger with Turntine, right? I mean, because I think Michigan was actually right there with John Turntine and are still in the conversation, but I think it's going to be tougher with 2 guys that other schools are going to tell them are going to play tackle. They're going to say Walbridge and Lee are definitely tackles for them. You're going to play guard if you commit to Michigan. You can play tackle for us. Otherwise, I could see Michigan sitting back, letting senior film develop, and either flipping a guy that they've already offered or looking for a late riser. I think they think they're in a position of power right now up front with what they did last cycle, the cycle before that too, honestly. I mean, again, you talk about Blake Frazier, Ben Roebuck, Jake Guarnera is probably one of those names at center, right, Sam? I mean, he's a guy who's got a bright future at Michigan. Caden Strayhorn last cycle, another guy that Michigan really, really liked, not just because they didn't just take him because he was an MSU legacy to stick it to Michigan State. They love his game. He probably projects as center. So, I think Michigan's in a spot where they're going to keep going after some of the bigger names that are still out there. Like I said, Turntine, I think Kelvin Obot out of Idaho. I don't think they're going to get him, but he's still a guy they're going to keep recruiting and just go from there with it. So, yeah.
Yeah, you got to love their contingent. We could call this the trench episode. You got to love the contingent of coaches that they have on that side of. I think that is such a huge part of their. You talk about their recruiting pitch. I think that's a big part of it as well. Like, where are you going to go in the country where you get coached better than Michigan? I think that is. Who can argue?
Right.
Like, legit, who can argue? They have the resume because the head coach can. It's like, look, Joe Moore Awards, like, that's undisputed, undeniable. I did that, right? And I'm still here. The head coach of the University of Michigan coached 2 lines to the Joe Moore Award, eventually a national championship, right? And the offensive line coach now was a part of that run as the tight ends coach. But then you just went and got Juan Castillo, who is one of the most decorated guys in the country. He was here before. He knows the culture. Had a hand in all of this during the time that he was here before. Is one of the most respected guys in the country. And now he can really have his hands on. I mean, think about that. If Grant's on the road recruiting, you can have a guy here, nuts and bolts, like working on technique with those guys. When Grant is working on scheme, you can have a guy working on technique with those guys. It's unbelievable. You still got Brett Ingles in there, who was a line coach on a Super Bowl team with the New Orleans Saints. I mean, you got offensive line coaches oozing out of the pores of the building at the University of Michigan. Steve, that's an unbelievable pitch. At least it would be, if I were an offensive lineman, it'd be an unbelievable pitch to me. And it sounds like it's an unbelievable pitch to a lot of these linemen that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, these, like, technically you could argue, I mean, they beat Alabama for all 3 of McWhorter, Lee, and Marky Walbridge. I mean, Walbridge took an official to Alabama. They were still recruiting him at the end, right? It's just because he didn't do a lot of interviews, so he wasn't on like the camp circuits or anything. So not a kid whose recruitment was really publicized that heavily. But yeah, I mean, you're talking Michigan beat Penn State, Alabama, and then we talk about BC being the other finalists for the reasons we talked about. But yeah, I mean, that's why I mentioned like Bear McWhorter especially. He had every offer in the SEC. Michigan made him feel like a top priority. There were all the questions on the board about his ranking and rating and stuff. And it's like, if those guys you mentioned, if Ingles, Castillo, Sharon Moore, and Grant Newsome all think that he's a top 3 interior offensive lineman in the country based on this film, I think I'm going to lean with what those guys believe. No offense. I mean, right. I'll defend our rankings, vigorously, but I always, it makes it easier to come to the board though and let people know, like, hey, this is a guy that Michigan truly believes is one of the best interior linemen in the country. You can ignore the ranking. We're not just saying that to like soften, like to make you feel better or anything. Like, this is really like a guy that they wanted and went all in for, So yeah, I mean, I can't imagine just the level and depth of knowledge that those players at that position are getting. And honestly, even if you're a guy who doesn't make it and enters the portal eventually, these guys are still there's no way they're going to leave not being much, much better up front and much better offensive linemen than they would have been if they had spent those first 2 or 3 years somewhere else. Right. So, Michigan's going to play the 5 best players, but I think every offensive lineman on that roster is getting better and better every season and every offseason because Michigan has so much depth. You don't talk much about coaching depth, right? We're always talking about player depth, but like actually having like real coaching depth can be a huge, huge benefit for your roster. So yeah.
Know this about us. And Steve, I think you can disagree if I'm speaking out of turn for you, but we don't come to the board on every 3-star recruit saying, "Oh, that guy's underrated." We don't do that. I know I don't do that. But the ones that I do it on. There's a reason. Like when I came to the board on Tariq Boney saying this guy's underrated, one of the reasons I say that, obviously, first of all, I give my own opinion. But then I'll say, hey, look at Lou Esposito's track record. And this is, we will say, you give a coach the benefit of the doubt who can show you a resume like that. Like, question one, like if you get a coach who doesn't necessarily have a resume like that, then you question. It's like, okay, we got to wait to see. And it's fair to question, hey, he gets a 3-star guy and doesn't have any offers, and it's just like a shot out there, or it's a coach who comes in and gets a 3-star guy, doesn't have any these other offers, and he has never developed a guy like that. Then it's fair to question, like, that seems kind of questionable. I don't know. I don't know about that guy. But if it's a guy like Lou Esposito who's taken guys that are 2-star guys and turned them into 2nd-round draft picks, and he says this is a dude, he knows more than the rankings guys, right? When Greg Madison takes Aiden Hutchinson, and he has and I won't say any names. But there's a guy in the rankings office right now who was in the rankings meeting with Greg Madison, said, I don't think we should offer this guy right now. I don't know. This seems like a guy that might be a bit of a stretch. This just seems like a legacy offer. Good athlete, but seems more kind of like maybe a little bit of a kind of like a try-hard guy. Good athlete, but nothing special about him. Greg Madison said, what? This dude is special. I've seen these guys. This dude is going to be elite. I basically said, sit down, Junior. This is going to be a special player. I'm offering him right now. That's Aiden Hutchinson. So when a coach has a resume like that, you got to defer to the coach. Not on every guy. I mean, there's some guys that you can look at right now in other classes, even in Michigan's class, that a coach may have offered and might be a lower guy said, you got to wait to see, because that coach hasn't really developed a guy like that. So it's like, you wait to see. But on Lou's guys, you're like, hey, man, he's shown you that his 3-star guys ain't just 3-star guys, right? So when we talk about Marky Walbridge, hey, man, they've shown you when they take guys like that, or even Alistair Vallejo, the rankings guys have come around on Alistair Vallejo. Yep. But getting back to the offensive line, Marky Walbridge, you watch his tape, you use your own eyes, you see how athletic he is. And then when you look at this contingent of line coaches, from Sharon to Grant, now you throw in these pro guys who've seen it all. When they say it's a guy, Steve, you nailed it. It's a guy, and they aren't all going to hit, but they got enough guys in the room who they think are guys that they're going to have a hell of an offensive line for years to come, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, and yeah, reputation has a lot to do, I think, with the foundation of our opinions. When like you said, when we know how much they like a guy or whatever. I mean, even go back to last cycle with Lou. I mean, it looks like they might have found something with Travis Moten too. Like, the kid they got out of Kentucky at the end of same deal where it's like, holy crap, that dude is humongous and he moves really, really well for his size. How did this guy slip through the cracks, the way he did and right into Michigan's lap? So yeah, we haven't always defended. I think there were about 4 or 5 cycles of linebacker recruiting there for a while back in the day that I don't think we were running to the board to talk about underrated, but by and large though, it starts with reputation. It starts with production. And I think Michigan at this point, pretty much across the board, it's really hard to find a spot where they don't have somebody who's done one or both of those deals and finding and or developing guys who eventually turned into something. So just listen to us. It's basically what we're saying. We won't lead you astray. So
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And by the way, still time to get in on that 50% off deal over on the MichiganInsider.com, right, Steve? But time's running out, right?
yeah, I think there's about 48 hours left. We'll be pumping it out here this afternoon, I assume. But yeah, I mean, the beginning of July itself looks like it's going to be a really huge beginning, I guess, to the month for Michigan. But again, an annual sub gets you all the way through the football season, all the way through next official visit season. You know, obviously Michigan focused on 2026, but 2027 looks like an interesting cycle. I mean, the quarterback recruiting in that class is going to be one of the more interesting positions. I feel like wide receivers, there's a plethora of dudes just in the region alone. I think where there's going to be some fun recruitments, Dakota Grant, Quentin Burrell, right? I mean, there's going to be a lot of fun, interesting recruitments in 2027. So yeah, no, I mean, it's 50% off. That's one of the better deals we give all year. And I do think it's going to be a while till we have another like big promo. So yeah, this would be a good time to get in because content's going to be flowing. And I think Michigan's going to continue to see some good news come their way.
Absolutely. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this special edition of the Michigan Recruiting Insider. A big fish in the boat, Carter Meadows, the highest rated recruit in the class, officially in the fold for the Maize and Blue. Hope you enjoyed this special episode. We're going to be coming with another one this week. So be on the lookout for that. Thanks for watching this special edition of the Michigan Recruiting Insider.